Hello everyone. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public or press who have joined us today, either in person or watching via the live stream, to this meeting of the Cambridge Joint Area Committee at the Guildhall in Cambridge. Both councils allow filming and photography at their public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures, tweet or blog during the meeting, but please could I request that members of the committee and the public turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is in place. Would the Democratic Services Officer report on any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Moore, Councillor Young and Councillor Machini. And Councillor Boulas is here as a substitute for Councillor Machini.
Thank you very much. I think we'll go round the councillors and you can introduce yourselves. We'll start with Councillor Bullet.
Hello, I'm Councillor Alex Bulat from Abbey Division.
County Councillor Alex Beckett, Chair of the Highways and Transport Committee, and from Queen Edith's.
City Councillor Dave Bajan from Romsey.
City Councillor Naomi Bennett, Abbey Ward.
Councillor Bird, Chesterton Ward.
Hello, I'm Councillor Mike Black from Arbury.
Councillor Richard Robertson from the City Council, Petersfield.
County Councillor Philippa Slatter from Trumpington Ward.
And I'm Councillor Katie Thornborough from Petersfield Ward and Chair of this committee. Today we've got officers Tim Weatherspoon, Nick Milnes, Sonia Hanson.
I think we have to correct the record.
Sorry. Weatherfield. Apologies. Gary Baldwin and Philip Hammer is going to join us remotely, and we have a committee manager, Nick Mills, here as well. So would any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or non-statutory disclosable interests? Councillor Bajan.
Chair, I'm a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move on to item 2. We're asked to approve the minutes of the last committee meeting, which was held on the 18th of September 2024 as an accurate record. Can I ask whether any members disagree with the accuracy of the minutes? Councillor Bennett.
I just had a very small query on the action list, and that relates to the item about, where is it? Page 2, I think. The item about Milton Road and Havenfield. I asked the officer about it and was told that there's an update coming in March, but that's not on the action list and it's not on the forward agenda either. So I just wondered if we could look at that.
Sonia, do you want to respond?
Yes, there will be an update in March. Unfortunately, this got published the day before we had confirmation from the GCP. So Lynn from GCP will prepare an update for March meeting.
Thank you very much.
So, Councillor Bennett, if we make sure that goes in the forward plan so that it's covered, and then would there so that we can sign off the minutes, if that's okay, as long as we make sure we pick that up.
Very happy with that, Chair.
Thank you.
Mine was for the action log as well, actually. I don't know if you want that. It's not a matter of the minutes, so if you want to do that bit first.
Okay, if there's no further issues on the minutes, I will sign them at the end of the meeting.
So if I may. So on the action log, if I may, the minute number 6, we are expecting at some point an update on the services that are going to be covered by the Cambridge Joint Area Committee. I appreciate this is very much a work in progress
and I don't want it to be fixed anytime soon because it's going to be iterative, but just to note that this is ongoing and we were hoping to have something today. I recognise it isn't today, but we mustn't lose it.
I think Councillor Bajan.
Chair, I've got 3.5 matters arising out of the minutes. Do you want to take those now?
Yes, I would like to take them now.
Right, one at a time. In the minutes, it says, with regards to the Romsey residence parking scheme, that work was ongoing to identify a solution that could allow a scheme to be fully developed. Perhaps an officer could tell me what work's been done since and what's the likelihood of this being, or when it's likely to come forward. Do you want to take all three? Right.
Let's take all three.
Second one is about pavement parking on Mill Road, and that there were difficulties because of the civil enforcement officers were unable to issue a ticket to the majority of car users due to the fact that there was a time span that you could park there. Well, most of the yellow lines have been redone now, and they've got that double hatching on the pavement, which means that immediately you park there, for whatever reason you park there, then you're liable to be ticketed. I'd like to know what success that's brought about, having spent all that money to do that. And my third point is that there would be further thought about Mill Road infrastructure once the modal filter on Mill Road was agreed and installed. Well, it's agreed and it's installed. I'd like an update on that. And the half a point is, can somebody please explain why we're having to wait till March before the fines come into place?
Can you just, so the Mill Road item, which was your third query, sorry, can you just go through that again? What did you want? What's the first part of that query?
Sorry, on the Mill Road scheme, it said that we wanted to look at how there was the work going on to improve Mill Road. And the last line, it says, it was noted that improvements to the Mill Road scheme were being developed, so something is actually going on, obviously, on the county, and would be considered further once a decision had been made by the county and on whether to install the modal filter on Mill Road Bridge. But that's taken place, so I'd like to know what work had been done already and what's been done since that, please.
Okay, so there's three, are we actually?
3.5, actually, Chair. The other one was, could somebody explain why they're not fining people till March?
Yeah, I got that. So are these we're not having a TRO update, are we? Do you want to answer that?
Yeah. If I could suggest we get written updates for them, because for the minutes, it's about the accuracy of the minutes, and matters that are arising can be dealt with separately because those officers aren't present at the meeting.
I was just checking that none were being covered in the agenda. Okay, so they have to be taken away, and you'd get a written answer, or they'd come back to the next.
Is that
committee.
the way that shouldn't this committee have officers here to answer those questions?
We're doing matters arising. So I think actually the one about that there was a point made about road improvements being developed for Mill Road. I think that is a matter arising, but we need to schedule that in for a report to come back, because that's unless there's an officer here to do a very quick answer.
So nobody's able to answer that question, Chair?
I think
I think you need to use your...
Sorry, Chair, just to check with the Democratic Services Officer, I believe this committee is run via the County Council's Code of Procedure, which I don't believe does matters arising. Nick, are you able to confirm?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, we don't take matters arising or any other business on the agenda because there's no information on the agenda on them, and officers attend the meeting to present the reports and answer to the reports that are on the agenda, which is why there aren't officers related to those items, those matters at the meeting.
Well, thank you for that
Can I
clarification.
say that, Councillor Thornbury, if Councillor Bajent wants to come and talk to me afterwards, I'm very happy to talk him through all of those points as well, though.
Chair, I thought this committee had been set up to enable the city and the county to cooperate on matters to do with the traffic and roads in our city. Now, if I don't want to talk to a...
Point of order, Chair. As I understand...
Can you use your microphone, please?
As I understand it, there is no mechanism to include ad hoc items on the agenda, that we discuss the items that have been published on the agenda only. That is as I understand it. Thank you.
So I think this actually comes under what Councillor Slatter was saying earlier about how the committee was run and how, terms of reference. I think the one point that was made in the last minutes was that there were road improvements being developed for Mill Road. They were in the minutes of the last set of minutes, and therefore that can be taken as an action to come back to the committee, and that wasn't highlighted as an action, but I think that is an action, and I think this committee would be very interested in that.
Chair, wasn't it? On all the points, these are all points lifted from the minutes. So if we have minutes, then surely we must be able to ask questions appertaining to things that are in the minutes.
Chair, I think Councillor Bajan, you need to come back before the meeting. If we do not highlight actions as coming as the result of the minutes, then we need to amend the minutes and have them as actions, and the officer can deal with them and ready for the meeting, rather than raising them in the meeting.
If I could also just add that the minutes are on the agenda purely for the purpose of signing them and agreeing them. They're not on the agenda to rediscuss the items that are included in the minutes. They're purely on the agenda to approve the accuracy, and it's not about reopening the discussion on what was discussed at the previous meeting.
Thank you for that interpretation, but surely we must be able to question things within the minutes. Otherwise, what's the point in having them?
If it's a question of the accuracy, then certainly, by all means, the accuracy can be questioned, but the content of the minutes is what was discussed at the previous meeting, and those issues are not on the agenda this time.
So would you suggest that if I want to raise things from the minutes in the future, that I write to the chair and ask for them to be put on the agenda? Is that what you're suggesting?
That would be correct, yes.
So that's how the county do it, is it?
It is, yes.
I would also like to say that as we discuss, as we go through the agenda items, we would like to summarise at the end what the discussion is, and if there is an action arising, as you've pointed out, we'll try and highlight that so that it's clear going forward. Councillor Slatter.
Yes, I would like to say I share your frustration, because this particular issue has been slowed greatly, as we know, by the actions of others outside our control. I had asked for, indeed, an update of the Mill Road and how things were going to be on the agenda, but I was advised that this would not be possible this time. If we can give interim updates to councillors, I hope that will be made possible. I know that the chair is making nodding noises, nodding faces. But I was going to raise it at the end of this meeting on agenda planning, that I think certainly by the next meeting of this committee, we should be able to get some firm updates and also an idea of how the design of improvements that the modal filter should make possible is going forward. Again, with local councillors playing a particular part, I hope, already in any sort of consultations.
I really do appreciate that, but that is March. So that's 6 months after an answer was given before we get a report back. Now, each of those actions that I'm picking up from the minutes, I was told, the minutes say officers are working on it. So there should be something to tell us. And so it takes 6 months for something to come back. I find that just incredible.
I also know that that question has been raised at the GCP at the last board meeting, and it's going to be reported back to the GCP about the Mill Road and what the opportunities there. I think we're going to have to leave this and move on. And I think it may be that Councillor Beckett can answer some of your questions on this matter. Is it Councillor Black?
Just quickly on this, Chair. This is a joint committee between the City Council and the County Council, isn't it? I'm just wondering, does the City Council take matters arising on minutes and any other business like any other normal democratic organisation like a trade union? Because the County Council doesn't, Dave. I'm sorry. We behave, and it frustrates the hell out of me that you go to a committee and there's something enormous brewing, which is following on from what you decided the last time, and they won't let you blast it. Well, let's discuss it. You have to shoehorn it in, and we arrange our affairs on the County Council in a very illogical and strange way in not having matters arising in any other business. But that is the way the County Council, I mean, does the City Council do matters arising in any other business?
Well,
So, I mean, I'd be
minutes-
quite happy to do it the way the City Council does it, but anyway, that's my little point.
Councillor Black, there is, at the end of the last minutes, there are actions required as a result of the minutes. I think if there are actions required as a result of our discussion, we should highlight them as matters arising, and they are with a date for when they can come back. So we just need to be a bit more on the ball about this, so it's very clear that there is something that we're expecting information about or action as a result of this. Councillor Beckett, and then we're going to move on, I think.
Chair, I was hoping to say that I do actually, I don't know whether this is the right point, we have the action log, and at the County Council, questions about the action log, kind of how we do things. So I do have a question on the action log. I don't know whether we want to get to that right now, but that is usually the way to do it, is to add something to the action log, and then you're allowed to ask a question on the action log and when that's going to happen, which I think makes sense. But I don't know whether the chair wants me to raise my question now or in a minute.
Let's raise the question now, because I think we're pretty much at the action log now.
Thank you, Chair. This has already got a little bit funny. So my question was on the action log, which is item 21, which is the King's Parade barrier. So this is one of those items that, I mean, 3+ years ago, the County Council agreed to keep the TRO in place, and that at the time, it was explained that the City Council would redevelop it. I'm aware this has kind of lost impetus somewhere along the line, and I know some of that is down to funding. Now, I've separately been working in the background. I think I've found a source of funding that's willing to help us with it. I know this is saying that it's going to come back in June 2025, though, but I don't know. That's quite a long time away, and I don't want us to lose any funding opportunities. Is there a way that we can kind of have a conversation at some point to make this start to happen? I think the County Council is very happy to take it on if that makes it easier. It's a bit of a weird one that's got lost between the ways. So is there someone that I can talk to really get things moving on King's Parade rather than waiting until June?
Are you suggesting that the work could be done so that it could come back to the March meeting rather than the June
Either the March meeting or whether we can start a conversation before then rather than waiting on June. Happy to. I don't know whether, sorry, Tim, whether it's you I need to talk to about it or just how we can start the County Council talking to the City Council and really start to make some progress on it rather than just waiting for an update.
Tim, do you know whether we could do that?
Chair, I would be certainly very willing to speak to Councillor Beckett about the way forward, because this involves a number of officers both within the City Council and the County Council, and I've been advised of this June date. I can't promise that an earlier date would be possible, but dialogue is always a good way forward to see what we can do.
That sounds brilliant. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Bird.
I have to agree with Councillor Beckett about this as well. We also discussed about the design, didn't we, of the new gate? And since then, we've heard not a thing. So I think it should be looked at quite urgently.
Well, I think this committee agrees with your sentiments, and it would be really good to have something brought forward if possible. Thanks. So is it appropriate to add on to the action log the points raised by Councillor Bagent?
Or on the agenda panel?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, they will be included in the minutes and in the action plan, in the action log.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on, if there's no other items on the that current action log, to item 3, which is public questions and petitions, which we have not got any. Councillor Bennett.
Apologies, Chair, but I forgot to raise another query on the action log, which is for third point. There isn't a number, but the officer responsible is G. Weller. It says that there's an information on barriers to active travel, such as disabilities and time poverty, to come back to this committee today, but it doesn't seem to actually be happening. Do we have any information on when that might come back?
Good question, thank you.
Yes, that is coming to the March meeting, but it's through GCP now because most of the active travel schemes in the area, I did ask Grant about this, but he said most of the active travel schemes were GCP, so they've been asked to do an update for March.
The reason why I was asking that is that at last week's Local Government Association Disabilities Champions Network, we discussed an access audit that had been obtained by the Bristol councillors, and that seemed to be a very useful document to highlight accurately barriers to active travel in a particular geographical area. And it's something I think it would be quite a useful tool to investigate.
So the document that you've mentioned, can we pass that on to the GCP?
Well, do you have a link to the document you could send me?
I can send it on.
Okay, thanks.
I do think that this was something raised of interest in this committee, and I think, I don't know what members think, but if the report is going to the GCP, I think it would also be good if the report came to this committee, just so as a note to say that it's
coming to
not the GCP.
Sorry for confusion. GCP have been asked to do an update for CJAC in March. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Any other items on the action log?
Chair, can I just pick up on item 6, which was about the coming up with the list of overlapping functions. As I've explained in the update, we are doing that, and just to make sure that we're joined up with other partners, we are consulting at officer level on that. That is coming up with the a list of functions and contacts across those services. I think from the point that was the question that was raised, though, was that there was some suggestion that it related to the functions of the what the committee should be doing. This is just a straight list of the functions not relating to the terms of reference of the committee. I just wanted to make that clear, so that there was no misunderstanding. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Beckett.
Sorry, Chair. Just on that point, I would say, I think Dave is finding this as well, that the terms of reference of this committee are very tight. I'm not suggesting that we do this straight away, but in a year's time it might be worth us reviewing both at a county council and a city council level the terms of reference of this committee and what is included and what is not included, judging by how things are done. Maybe just do a review report of how this committee is functioning and what we can do to improve it.
The terms of reference actually state that they will be reviewed on an annual basis, so they will be reviewed.
Okay.
If you can't get it right first time.
Now we will move on to item 4, because there are no public questions or petitions. So item 4 is the traffic regulation order objections associated with the proposed disabled persons parking bays in Edinburgh Road and Ross Street, Cambridge. So the first report is on the proposed disabled parking bays in this area and will be presented by the County Councillor's Traffic Manager, Sonia Hansen.
Thank you, Chair. So this item is two different parking bays that are proposed, one in Edinburgh Road, one in Ross Street. The purpose is to let members know about the feedback that was received and to get comments on the report and the disabled parking bays, which was set out. There's various appendices that give the details of where the parking bays are. And this is to enable somebody with a blue badge to have a space marked on the road near to where they live. It doesn't guarantee that they'll be able to park. It doesn't mean that another blue badge holder can't use that space, but it helps to enable them to be able to park close to their property and to enable them to lead more active lives by being able to park closer to home. So the report sets out the location and the objections received.
Thank you, Sonia. Before we open the debate to the committee, could I ask local members whether they would like to speak, starting on this matter as representing those wards? So, Councillor Jerry Bird, would you want to go? Do you want to talk about the Edinburgh Road one? That's actually in your... Okay, so you can go first. Neil, if you want to say anything on Ross Street, you can go second. Jerry first.
Okay, thanks, Chair. As you know, Edinburgh Road is in my county seat and also my city council seat, so covers both. I'm really pleased about this. This has been brought up before by the resident, and it's very important. That is one of the biggest problems, is when you have a disabled bay, it's not just for that person. And I think that has to be made sure that the resident will know this. I think it should be okay, and the area where it is, it will be fine. So I'm really pleased about this, so thanks, Sonia.
Thank you. Councillor Shayler, did you want to say anything?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm very happy with the way that this is proceeding. I spoke to Sonia about it earlier in the week, so I'm absolutely happy. There are some other situations where businesses need to have access to disabled persons, but this is not for discussion here. Thank you.
Councillor Bajan, do you want to speak as a city ward councillor?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the proposal seems perfectly reasonable. I would like to thank the county officers for the correspondence that we had about this. That was most useful.
So we'll just open it up now. Councillor Richard Robinson.
I don't think I've seen an item like this come to us before. The objection to the Edinburgh Road one I'm talking about, sorry. Edinburgh Road, the only objection is on the basis that the people shouldn't have a blue badge. Well, that's nothing within our control. I suggest in future, if that's the only objection, they should not bother to come to us. We can't change it anyway. I would suggest that we just ask the officers to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, with this structure, we have to bring them to this committee if there's objections. So that's why it's come. The process at the moment is set out that if we have objections to these, then we have to bring them to this committee. So that's why it came. But I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Next business.
Okay, so Councillor Slatter.
As has already been raised, it is really distressing, I think, for people who are fighting for something for an individual to find that it can't be actually allocated to them. even if it meant that it would be back into an ordinary parking space afterwards, because this is a very blunt instrument to help people with disabilities. And I just would like us to be able to take it forward, as even if it's a letter to the appropriate minister, if we are ever looking at the blue badge system, which I hope we will, this is a really key part of it, I think, that it's not assigned. Because if it was even a question of somebody buying a vehicle on the basis of having a parking space, and somebody comes along and tootles in there and takes it up, that person's whole mobility is compromised. So I know I'm shouting into the wind a little bit here, but this is something that's been a problem for years, and I don't know quite how we get it to the attention of the government to get primary legislation change. But I would hope that all the councillors here would agree that it should be actually designated for a person if it's created at the time as a result of that person asking.
I agree.
Thank you, Councillor Slatter. So if there's no further debate, we can I'll just read out the recommendations and we can have a show of hands. So the recommendation A is that the County Council's Executive Director for Place and Sustainability, in consultation with the local member, approve the proposed disabled persons parking bay in Edinburgh Road as published. I think we'll take them both together. And B, the same director, in consultation with local member, approve the proposed disabled persons parking bay in Ross Street as published. Can we have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Thank you. So we move on to item 5. The next report is on a proposed amendment to weighting restrictions in De Freville Avenue and will be presented by the County Council's Policy and Regulation Engineer, Gary Baldwin. Thank you.
Okay, this item is related to De Freville Avenue, and it's an application from a third party, that's from a resident that wants to remove a parking bay to enable them to put in some drop curbs and a vehicular access. That will provide off-road parking for up to 3 cars, and they're going to put some EV charging in as well. And due to that loss of, well, it's only a loss of 1 parking space, which would be converted to double yellow lines. There were 3 objections from 2 households, and essentially they're objecting to the loss of the parking space in the vicinity of their house because it's from neighbours of the applicant. Now, that particular road, there's a residence parking scheme in that area, but there's sort of double-sided parking there, so there's quite a bit of capacity on that road, and we don't have any real concerns about the loss of 1 parking spot, given the fact that they're providing off-road parking for 3 cars, so we don't have any real problems with that, so we recommend that it goes ahead.
Thank you. Again, before we open up to debate, we have some local members and we wondered if they wanted to speak as county or city councillors. So, Jerry, Councillor Bird, this is in your division. Do you want to say anything?
No, I've got no problems with it. Chair, seems fine to me.
Thank you. Is there any debate? Councillor Slatter.
Just a couple of questions to the officer. I'm very happy with your recommendations, and I think you've implied the answer to the question I was going to ask. That this does this scheme allow more than 1 permit per household anyway? That's the first question. And the second one is, when it is paved over, will it be permeable by request? Will it be required to be permeable?
When you say permeable, what, the surface material? I don't know, to be perfectly honest with you. It would be in line with our normal conditions, but I'm not involved in the drop curb. I'm only processing the TRO. So that's already been approved by our local highway officer, and he would be just working to standard, sort of our standard specification for sort of highway works, really. But I can find out from him. I can ask the question.
It's more of a planning thing, isn't it, really?
So I have a...
So it was the side of it that I was concerned about. I mean, every square metre matters, in my opinion.
So I have a question. When we approve planning applications, we put a note on to say that this doesn't, you might need to get building regulations. If this is approved, would there be a note to say that they might need planning consent? Because this is a conservation area and there are aspects of this that might actually require planning consent.
I'll bring that to their attention when I get back to them, yeah. As I say, that side of it doesn't really concern me. The application will initially go to our highway officer, and I would expect he would normally tell them whether they needed to apply for planning permission, or they might have already done it. But I'll remind them when I get back to them to explain the outcome of this and just remind them about the planning application. And that is because it's, what did you say, it's conservation area? That's the reason, right? Because the classification of road, generally, if it's a residential street, it doesn't need planning permission on that basis. But if it's a conservation area, it probably does. Sorry, Councillor Slatter, there was another point that you made before on the material thing.
It was simply because it seemed that the objections are on the grounds of loss of on-street parking. If the people are going to park it one or even 2 or 3 cars, I think that those objections are dealt with in the application.
Okay.
So I agree with you, essentially.
Councillor Beckett.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, having read the objections to this, I can really sympathise with those objecting in that currently there's obviously a space that is open to anyone to park in, and essentially one space that's available to anyone to park in is going to be removed, which will allow 3 private spaces on somebody's own drive. In a certain element, that feels slightly unfair to me. One household should essentially get to reserve 3 spots of their own. It's on their own drive, but they're essentially getting to reserve 3 spots of their own rather than having to compete for the on-street parking. But I do think that the fact that it frees up 3 spaces for the price of 1 probably does add to the benefit of everyone and, reduce the pressure on parking in the area. So probably is better in the long run. I will be voting for it because of that, but I can really sympathise with the feeling of unfairness that one house gets to essentially get their own parking above everyone else's.
Yeah, that's true. That's a fair point. That's not the only house in that particular section of Defrevel that's got a drop curb, though. About 40–50% of the others have, so it'd probably be a bit harsh of us to actually refuse them permission for the drop curb. So, it's quite difficult on that basis.
It'd be quite good if they could contribute to, say, an extra parking space in a park and ride or something. Make up for it, but
Dream on.
Anyway. If there's any more debate, okay, I'll read out the recommendation. Is that the County Council's Executive Director of Place and Sustainability, in consultation with the local member, approve the amendment to the waiting restrictions as published. A show of hands for that, please. Okay, that's everyone, thank you. We'll move on to item 6. The next report is an update on the County Council's review of its residents' parking scheme policy and its proposed price increases for permits and on-street parking, and it will be presented by the County Council's Parking Operations Manager, Philip Hammer, who will be joining us remotely.
Hello, can you hear me, councillors?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for not being Nicola Gardner, but there are reasons Nicola cannot attend, and she would love to present this paper, but she can't for personal reasons. I'd like to apologise for not attending myself, but I have a child responsibility, which at this time of year takes precedence over many things. So, councillors, you have in front of you the on-street parking policy review. Things are very much ongoing. This is long overdue. The last review was 2017. So we're now putting this forward. We're working on this. We've just completed the initial public engagement. So we're getting feedback on that to see how we fashion things in the future. And hopefully we'll have a substantive policy review which you can consider and hopefully enact in the summer of 2005. You also have the increase in charges on the on-street and on resident parking, which will go to the County Committee in January. I think it's all fairly self-explanatory, but if you'd like me to clarify anything on the information provided, please ask me questions.
Thank you very much. And No need to apologise for working at home because of family commitments. It's really good that you can join us with those commitments. Thank you. So, committee debate. We'll have Councillor Slatter and then Councillor Bennett.
It's a question about something that isn't in the report, actually. I don't know where to talk to. Right. Is the camera there? Yeah, right, Philip.
Yes, you're pointing at me. Yes.
I'm talking at you, talking to you now.
Yep. Good. Good.
No reference to the period of time to be covered by a permit. Obviously, it's by the hour with the on-street parking charges. But I do wonder whether, in fact, this needs to be brought back as a possibility. Certainly, if it has been talked about by officers and the pros and the cons have balanced out that it's not to be done by hourly rate, I would like to see that written down, because certainly for a lot of uses, particularly visits by carers and other regular short visits that are absolutely vital, it's rather crude, if I understand it correctly, that is it a full day or half a day that these work?
Are you referring to kind of in the resident areas or the on-street pound display, the resident areas?
Residents.
Well, we are currently in the process of doing a procurement for a new IT system. I think to say, and Councillor Beckett is probably cringing in a corner, that we haven't produced the best out of systems available in the world at the moment because we've been caught up in a rather antiquated one. Well, we are looking at getting a new system which will actually give some flexibility. If we can do something to reduce the kind of give us a breakdown on time allocations within resident zones for visitors, that is one of the things we've aimed and aspired to get in the procurement. So hopefully we'll have those options in the future, which means the resident schemes will have more access for parking within them, and also make sure that the people who need to get in there for an hour or 2 or 3 hours will be facilitated.
That's good news. I know we raised it years ago when it was first being brought in, and if it's being looked at again, that's fine. We haven't in the seating arrangement got a corner for him to cringe in, but over to Councillor Beckett.
Councillor Beckett, do you want to come in before Councillor?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for letting me come in early. But Councillor Slatter, you are totally right. I don't know whether I need to declare an interest in this one, that I live in a residence parking zone, so I'm very aware of the issues with residence parking, particularly those individual accounts. The fact that there's 5 on 1 is also really difficult, because if you end up with a trade, they nearly always walk off with 4 of your permits to then go and use it at another point. So I know Philip and I have been discussing what can be done about that, because currently trade permits really don't work for those like carers, for the person that comes to service your boiler, where you only want them to be there for an hour, but you want to be able to allow them to park to be able to do that. So I think we really need a reimagining of how visitors parking permits work, and I know Phil and his team is working on that with the new IT system. It is something I am really passionate about, because particularly as we start to roll out residence parking in more and more areas, and we see Councillor Bajet and Councillor Shayla having it in their area and lots of other ones, we need to be making sure that it works better and works better for all of us. So yeah, definitely something I'm very aware of.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett, and then Councillor Bajet.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 completely different points. The first one is councillors are very well aware that having a residence parking permit does not guarantee a resident parking space, because there is no limit on the number of permits that are issued. This sometimes comes to quite a shock and an unpleasant surprise to residents. And I think it would be really useful if we could publish some sort of data about the number of residence parking permits issued and the theoretical number of spaces, because there's 2 reasons for that. One is that it would save an awful lot of ward councillor time if we weren't just having to explain this, and also people could make an informed decision about whether they get a car and whether they apply for residence parking permit. Do you want me to break now before I do the second point?
Or can you do the second
point? Can I answer on that first? Councillor, absolutely correct. We do have all that data available by resident zone, with the number of spaces we've identified and the number of permits and the number of visitor permits issued, because that's another implication in there as well. So we do need to really think about this, and this will feed it very much into the policy. we do need to question about the number of permits you allow in each zone. You know, certain zones are very heavily subscribed, some are not. So we need to have a kind of an informed view on what's the best way of doing this, and hopefully you're contributing to that that debate, and we'll come up with a solution which actually addresses that. The fundamental thing about having that information on the website, I will get that done. Sorry, if you'd like to come back to your next point.
And my second point is about oversized vehicles, which we
Yes.
experience a lot of in Abbey. Some of them take up 2 or even 3 parking spaces. They also tend to be heavier and cause more wear on the highways. And the question is, have we ever looked at having a differential rate for these outsized vehicles?
Can I just come in on that? Because I think there may be some debate on this item, discussion. Do you want us to talk about it before you answer? Do you want to hear what we all want to say on that?
Can I say where we are at the moment?
Yes, please.
That'd be, right. I mean, at the moment, the policy has been out for the initial public engagement. So we're getting views already. The fundamental question about the size of vehicles has always been raised. Hopefully, we'll come to an agreement if we are saying that basically certain size vehicles are banned or certain weight vehicles are banned. Then as long as we agree within the policy and the process followed, we can do that in the future. So this is the starting point to actually kind of firm up, because, you know, councillors will decide what the policy is. And the policy will dictate which vehicles will be allowed. We're looking very much with our new procurement is a technology to actually identify the right size vehicles. So one of the problems we have is somebody applies for, you've got to actually identify the vehicle and all the technicalities about its dimensions and so on. We're looking at kind of making that more automated. So that'll be good for us on a practical terms as a parking service. But absolutely, the question of size, dimension, weight, something we need to agree in the policy, which will ultimately be decided next summer, is very much on the cards, and it's time for councillors to kind of express their views, and hopefully it'll go into the policy, and we'll get something which works for everybody.
Well, I would certainly like to say something on this. So can we just have, if anybody wants to speak on this specific item, length, width and weight? Richard, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. I do think we must lay down a stop on this point. The size of some vehicles now are about the same size as a tank that was in the Second World War. Seriously, they are. They're absolutely enormous. There cannot be. If you're going to choose that sort of vehicle, you've got to choose where you're going to live as well. It's not appropriate on streets where there's not enough parking. So I would certainly say we should not change the limit from above 5 to make it above 5 metres.
Thank you. Councillor Beckett, did you have your hand up on?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For fear of opening a can of worms, I'm going to open the can of worms anyway. This is something that I think we really do need to consider. I also think we need to look at whether the same rate for residence parking should apply to all vehicles. So, for instance, you know, if the length thing is a really interesting one, because I can totally see the idea of not wanting tanks, but I can also see that if you're a family with, you know, 4 or 5 children having to drive a 7-seater, that why should you be restricted from parking, you know, and being able to do that at the same time and needing a long vehicle to be able to do that? Or if you're somebody that perhaps has a disability but maybe not actually a blue badge and that needs a longer vehicle to be able to, you know, contain your wheelchair, why should you be restricted on that one as well? But I do think this is a question that we really need to start asking is, how should we be charging people? Should we be charging different rates for different types of vehicles? If we are charging different rates for different types of vehicles, should we be doing that on length, on size, on weight, on emissions? What is the right thing? I don't have the answers to that now, but I would really love to hear if members of the committee had thoughts on how we should be doing this going forwards, because it is something that we really need to be considering.
I'll just quickly jump in. I think width is a real problem because it actually causes obstructions on some of the narrow roads. So I think personally, I think we should have a width limit, and I think it should be variable charging for small, you know, good discounts for small cars and weight. I think some basically SUVs are very, very heavy, and they cause much more wear and tear. So I think its weight and length would be. Councillor Bullock, Councillor Shayler, then Councillor Bader.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think one of the issues, like looking at my casework with some residents who are just like a little bit over that limit, is the fact that there's no discretion in the current policy. So I do think we have to consider this, because there's some cases when it's just a few centimeters over the limit. And yes, Councillor Beckett mentioned sometimes with like larger families or like other types of vehicles, it can seem unfair from a resident perspective. But at the same time, I agree with the Chair saying we should look at variable rates, because for the people considering perhaps buying a car, if you actually had a discounted rate to get a smaller car, you probably would be incentivized to consider that, unless you really needed the larger size. So it could be an incentive for people not to perhaps buy a larger car than they need to at the beginning.
I think you misinterpreted my gesture, but I will say that we have the largest and heaviest cars on average ever now. And you would think that efficiency would go the other direction, but it's absolutely not. And we are currently reviewing the width of our restrictions, because the average car can't get through the average restriction that was put in 20 years ago, for instance. So, yes, I think we should think about having narrower cars in the city.
Councillor Bajan.
Yeah, maybe I should know a bit more about this, but is it, in the resident parking scheme, is it only private vehicles that are allowed to park, or commercial vehicles park? And aren't they already, the width of the vehicle, if we're taking like the driver and the passenger width that way, isn't that designated by the white line? And if the vehicle's bigger than that, don't they get a ticket? Because I think they do. But I suddenly thought about lorries. You know, if somebody, I understand about the disability, of course, we can't work against that. But if somebody parks a lorry in a residence parking zone, is that covered by a resident ticket? Because we certainly should be debating that.
I think that's what Councillor Beckett was raising, but I think my understanding is you do get a ticket if you're outside if you're wider. But what I've seen is people hop up onto the curb then sometimes, and then they don't get a ticket. Anyway, we'll go back to the officer. Oh no, Councillor Bennett. No.
Wanted to add one more point, which is that I'm really glad that there's some support for opening up the subject of higher charges for supersized and heavier vehicles, and also those like sports utility vehicles, which are more dangerous to the public and are more likely to cause a life-changing accident in a collision. But if we do this, County Council does this, can we also do this as a City Council and look at bringing forward matching proposals?
Do you mean on City Council?
I mean on sort of the car parks that we manage and from which we draw an income.
Oh, I think anything's possible. And we'll go back to the officers now. Thank you.
We work very closely with the City Council, and we enforce the car parks of the City Council. So, you know, we work with them on what they want to do and what limits they want to set and dimensions and considering all those points. So, yeah, it's very easy for us to join up on that and kind of come to what I would say is having a consistent approach is always a good thing, whether it be on street or off street. On the side, on a vehicle, you know, to apply to be on the resident zone, you have to show the vehicle is registered to your property. So often you often see vans which are owned by people in resident zones because it's their works vehicle and also they're registered at their address. So they are allowed to do that. A lorry, I think, is more unlikely because they're usually registered to business organisations and so on. They wouldn't. Fundamentally, we do issue a ticket for out of bay. We are a very sensitive authority in regards to enforcement. We are not draconian. We are as considerate as possible. Minor overhangs we allow. We're not going to pursue those. We're not going to be, you know, 2 inches over the WL line. We're not issuing a ticket on that because let's be realistic about it. It's not that kind of compromising, so on. But there have been numerous examples where vehicles substantially overhang the road, the bay markings, in which case they get a penalty charge notice.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beckett.
Thank you very much, Chair, and that's really good to hear. I mean, on the point, Councillor Bant's point about car parking in the city car parking, I think for me personally, where this committee can do really well is where we are joining up those city and county council issues. So I think it's really good to have the county council policy here together. But I wonder whether next year it's possible to actually have a joint paper on both, because I think it's where we can scrutinise the overlap and how it works together, which is where this committee will actually give the most benefit. So I don't know whether, Chair, through you, whether it would be possible to add an action or an agenda item for a future meeting with actually the whole kind of parking policy together and how we do things across all of our different parking and what the old goals and ambitions of that are and how we manage it.
So, Philip, would that be possible for a joint, as the county are considering this and talking to the city parking?
We speak with the city quite regularly. Obviously, we'll have to go through our superiors, but I don't see it. It's not beyond the ken of man that we kind of put together a joint paper and say what we're doing. I'd say there are different aspects. I mean, you know, one of the biggest parking issues for county council is park and ride, which we don't really talk about here because it's about the centre really. But all that needs to be brought in as well. So getting the whole dimension and the impacts on different things is a good point, I think, to actually get a more holistic view on what we're trying to do and what we're trying to sort out. But joint working on that isn't an issue, and I don't see it as being a problem. But obviously, I will discuss that with my betters.
Thank you very much. So is there any further debate? Okay, this is an item that we are to note, that the update on the residents' parking scheme policy is being reviewed, and that the proposed permit price and on-street parking charges increases, which are included in the County Council's draft business plan. We're just noting those. I think we duly noted them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. Finally, we have item 7, which is the final item of this agenda. And are there any updates to the agenda plan from officers or comments from members? Go to Son.
Well, I think we can put the King's Parade on as a future agenda item as discussed.
Councillor Slatter and then Councillor Richardson.
I had two, one of which you know already, which is the Mill Road update. Certainly, I think is needed and is definitely the right place to be having it. The contents of that would obviously depend on progress, but I would like to see updates on how the design of features on the road are going, and also how the criteria for authorisation of vehicles allowed through the gate is going, and what problems have come up and how they've been dealt with. So that's Mill Road, Busgate and associated subjects. Legal proceedings allowing. I'll say it for you, Councillor Beckett. I know that what you're thinking. Okay, and the second one is to do with the development of park and ride sites. They are we are not making the most of our park and ride sites, and I bring it up here because they're mainly to do with Cambridge City. For example, I've been having meetings about school transport. We have a really good independent schools transport forum going, where they're trying to cooperate on minibuses and slightly bigger buses. And also on the county, as we know, school transport is a big issue, and the degree to which we can bring students in, however we manage to make that work financially, into the city for 16+ education. There are so many issues like that in terms of particularly transport and scope for buses. And the other thing is that it is often largely empty at weekends, and we've had approaches for leisure use for young people, either skateboard tuition Or I gather the upcoming thing for young women is roller skating, if we didn't realise that. But that's become as our young people in public open spaces strategy, as I'm sure you know. I think it's the city paper, that, isn't it? But, you know, drawing attention to the fact that roller skating is something they like to do. We've got nice, smooth spaces, reasonably safe spaces where it could be made possible by certain dates with certain help. But certainly we need to be looking at park and ride sites and the staffing of them, which obviously can't be done for no cost, but we are going to be extending the hours, we hope, of the buses coming in and out. Therefore, there are staff on site. So a general reimagining, I think you used the word earlier, of park and ride sites.
I think most of the park and ride sites are actually in South Cambs District Council, who are not represented at this committee. And I think they are represented at the GCP, where this question has arisen about what is the brief for the new travel hubs. They're not park and rides, they're travel hubs. So this discussion is happening, and I think South Cambs need to be at the table as well.
And the table can be here, though.
Well, there is this discussion going on at the GCP. So it might be that we need to find out, we don't want to duplicate the works for officers. It might be that if it's coming back to the GCP, the report can also come back to here, to this. But the officers of the GCP are considering this. And there is also the development of the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy, which is happening right now. And the travel hubs are an important part of that. So I just think we're jumping the gun a little bit to ask for a report here when things are actively happening now, which the park and rides are very much part of that development of the transport strategy for Cambridge. So I think rather than bringing an update on them, it might be better to have an update on how they're being fitted into the greater scheme of transport strategy in the city.
I'm sorry, but I think we do need to make the most of the considerable local knowledge that is represented in this committee. Now, that might simply be that we just put ideas in, but we need to be sure that also the public out there know that this is a place where they can bring ideas. And that's what's been brought to me in terms of, you know, some things. It might sound very trivial, but we look in vain for good places for young women to be safe out in the open. So that's just one issue. Has the GCP looked at that? We don't know. Do we know what they're looking at? So I don't see why an update couldn't come here, even if it's not a decision-making body for that topic.
Councillor Bennett, and then come.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment that actually Councillor Neil Shaler took a question to the GCP about this very issue last autumn on behalf of the Abbey councillors. And it also shared the visitor survey that Cambridge United Football Club had done, which said that the main reason that fans said they didn't use the park and ride was toilet provision and the hours of opening. I understand that's being looked at, and I really do welcome that. And I would say, sadly, that our park and rides outside Abbey Ward are busiest at weekends because at weekends we are not Newmarket Road, we are Supermarket Road, and people come in from about 25 miles away to shop.
Thank you.
Well, there we are, local knowledge.
Councillor
Corrected me.
Thank you very much, and there are some very interesting points raised there. I'm not sure where this will end up, but actually maybe Councillor Slatter, we can talk something about the County Council as well, as obviously the County Council owns the assets of the park and ride at the moment, so maybe that is something we can talk about at a County Council level, even if not here. The one for me that I was tempted to suggest that we add, though, is something about that home to school transport and how we enable more and more children in the city to be able to take active routes to schools. It's very interesting to hear you there talking about the work going on with private schools and what's going on there. There's obviously a lot of work at County Council going on about home to school stuff. There's obviously the School Streets programme that's worked quite well, the youth travel ambassadors, and then the junior travel ambassadors. That I do think if it's okay with officers, it would be quite nice to bring an update paper on all the work that's going on around that. And I don't know whether there's anything that the City Council can do to feed into that as well. I'm not sure if the City Council does do anything around home to school transport, but maybe there's something that we can do there in terms of, you know, making more of our young people able and willing to choose active means on the way to school. I think would be really handy.
Sorry to come back for another go, but Councillor Bulat and I were discussing that very issue earlier this week with Stagecoach, and one of the things that we were talking about is that at the moment children who are sent end up going to school quite often by taxi. And I don't know about you, but when I was a school child back in the Stone Age, the main socialisation time was actually our journey to school. And that's where you made friends and you acquired boyfriends even. And, you know, you met people, you got play dates and your social life started. So if we're not having school buses on which everybody can go and our SEND children are being shoved off into expensive taxis, we aren't just wasting a lot of scarce money, but we're depriving those children of the chance to actually meet their peers. And I would really love to look at whether we can manage more joined up school transport.
Thank you. Nick, do you want to come back in?
Thank
on
you,
that? And
Chair.
then we'll
Yeah,
go to Richard Roberts.
just to say that all these points will get picked up in the minutes and the action log accordingly, but a lot of these issues aren't within the remit of the committee. They sit with other bodies, and so we can't have reports on all these issues. You know, the review of the terms of reference can pick that up. You know, we can look at incorporating more issues or more responsibilities for the committee, but as it stands, a lot of these matters like park and rides and home school transport don't sit with this committee, so can't have reports. But they will all be picked up in the minutes and responded to.
Councillor Robertson.
I've got an item which is very much on the agenda for this committee, and that is York Area's residents parking zone, not on the plans for next agenda. This is not acceptable. This is now well over 2 years that the work has been going on or not going on that project. Maybe 3 years now, I'm not quite sure. It was given to the GCP to get on with, and they gave it back to you to look after. The poor residents of the whole of the area from Hoover Street through to Newmarket Road have been overcome with parking from outsiders coming in every day, including weekends, parking outside their houses and not enabling them to park outside their houses at all. We must give it priority. Will the officers please give it priority, drop these anything else that those officers who are concerned with this might be doing, get this finished so that in the March meeting we can actually finish it off. Otherwise it'll drift into the PERDA period and we won't get it until the autumn. That is not acceptable.
I think we'll see if Sonia might be able to respond to that one. Is there any more information?
Yeah, we've had an update from Lynn. Should the revised schemes been signed off with local members? There were delays due to the exceptionally large TRO workload. We expect the draft TRO to be advertised in early 2025. And we hope to be able to bring it to the June CJAC, but that will depend on the scale and nature of the objections received. Would then be planned over the summer of 2025.
That didn't sound like a promise.
The promise is that it is going out for consultation early next year, in the new year, January. But from what we've been told, it's not going to come back to the March. It will be coming back to the June meeting because of unless there's no objections, I think. Richard.
I'm sorry, I really must object very strongly to that deferment of this matter. I understand you've had difficulty with getting officers to do the work, But if it drifts into next year, we might not even have the same council by June. This is asking for trouble. The poor residents in that area have got the ARU University parking outside their houses every day. They've got commuters going to the station. They've got people going on holiday from the station. They've got the people going shopping in what's left of the Grafton Centre. Every day is a real problem for these residents, and we cannot let it drift. Can you please get the TRO through and so it can come to the meeting in March?
Is there a way we can try and get this out? Maybe there'll be no objections and we can actually bring it forward. It's the Bagent.
These schemes are being paid for, I understand, by the GCP. So it shouldn't be a shortage of officer time. The money's there to do it. So there should be contractors or whatever employed to do this. This is the same with the Romsey scheme. You know, it's been in 3 years, probably even longer. You know, these things are just not getting done, and that doesn't make any sense why they're not getting done, because the county are not even paying for them.
Councillor Shaler, did you want to come back?
Thank you very much, Chair. I was just going to come back to the previous discussion about transport hubs instead of park and rides and things. There's a lot that is in the combined authorities' purview. On the county, we spend 30 million to get children to school and all that sort of stuff. But I suggest that there will be a role for this committee after bus reform goes through, and then we will really need to rebuild that network. At the moment, we fight with Stagecoach. They refuse to take passengers to train stations, and so no matter what we decide here, it will have little effect until we have control of those buses.
Okay, so I think
it should be on the forward agenda, but after we have bus reform.
okay, we're jumping around a little bit. So does anybody want to? I think the points raised by Councillor Bagent and Councillor Robertson, I think, are very valid, and I think we do need to understand why this is taking so long. Councillor Becker.
I would say that I think in council everything takes longer than I think. We talked about Kingsway Barrier, which has taken 3 years to get absolutely, you know, we're only just starting to make progress on that now. Things always take a while. If this does go out to consultation, you'll then have the period of consultation, which will be, you know, a period of time. Is that even, that may even be informal consultation, or does it need to do, does it go straight to formal consultation on that one?
That would be the formal consultation,
Okay,
which
formal
is a set period of
consultation.
time, and then you have to consider the
But
objections.
then, obviously, officers then need to take time to be able to analyse that one. Then reports need to be drafted. Then you're right, you end up in purdah period, which means that you can't easily bring it back at that time. So I think we have to be realistic that things, I totally understand the issues that residents face and the desire to do things quickly. That is so important for so many of us on so many different issues. But it is sometimes challenging given the resources that the councils have to be able to do things as quickly as we would all like. It's just one of those realities. What's important is, though, that we get it right, we do it well, and that we make sure that we listen to people. I would not be wanting to rush something through and perhaps get it wrong. I'd much rather we spend the time, do it well, do it right, and make sure it's right for all of us.
I agree, but what I think Councillor Bagent was raising was who is doing what? What exactly has the GCP been asked to do, and has that role stopped, or are they continuing? Because if they are still in a position to carry out this, where they've got maybe more time and manpower, then maybe they could be doing that. So I think that is a question we would like an answer to. And then Councillor Bullard.
Yes, it's on this topic as well, because I think like on some of the schemes it is taken unusually long, or at least not what we expected. So I think it's something about the communication as well, because I was involved in the York area scheme as well. Part of it is in Abbey, and I think initially you're expecting a timeline, then it's taking much longer. It's very difficult to communicate with residents who are, you know, waiting for a long time. So I think having clearer timelines about like all the GCP's plans on parking schemes is really important. I know in the paper, I think a couple of areas, you know, East Riverside was to be considered as one of the next areas, but no update has been given on that. So I think it's also about how we communicate with councillors so we can actually properly inform our residents rather than giving them false hopes or expectations that something will happen within the 4 years that we're councillors, and then, you know, it will take longer than that. And also, like, one of the other points on York area is the potential to actually, you know, save some other funds. So, for example, on Coldham's Lane, Councillor Bennett put in an application last year through the local highways improvement to deal with some parking issues there that can be easily included in the residents' parking scheme. But now, if this is delayed, then someone else will put another local highways application on that. So you can see how we're just trying to resolve the situation through different ways of funding when, yeah, having a quicker residents' parking scheme could actually save the other council budgets as well.
Councillor Bird, is this on residents' parking that you put your hand up? Okay, so can we have on the agenda for the next meeting an update on all the outstanding residents' parking schemes, and also what the GCP are doing and how much they're doing? What is the remit of the GCP in this respect? Councillor Robertson.
I would have thought we could be told today whether the GCP funding is available and officers could be brought in to do this work.
Would you know about this?
So just to explain, the traffic regulation order has to be done by county council officers. We've got a small team that do them, including Gary, and we have a huge list, a backlog of schemes that cover the whole county. Every single TRO has to go through a statutory process, be advertised, objections considered, delegated decision processes, committee reports. We have to take them on a first come, first served basis. The York one was on the waiting list. It's now at the top of the waiting list, so is next to be dealt with. Gary is going to be dealing with that one. GCP do the other side of it. They have funding for that. They are paying for the TRO. But we only have so many people and so much time to be able to deliver all of the TRO. The statutory process is, as Councillor Beckett said earlier, if it's not done correctly, we can end up in court having legal challenges. So we have to do the process by the book. It takes time, unfortunately, and we can only do so many at one time. And it's come to the top of the list, so it will be processed.
I still think that we need, I know that there's a question about the Romsey residents' parking scheme, and I still think there's some clarification about what the GCP are doing, or whether they're just, but also I think there's a question about communications, about our expectations and our residents' expectations because of what we've been told, because we have, for the York Street, we have been told again and again that it was going to be processed quite quickly. And therefore, it is very difficult to go back to the residents again. So I think that's part of the issue. So can we have it on? Can we have a report to the next meeting about these issues, please?
As I recall, we'd already asked. I think Lynn was going to do a GCP update. Is that already on the?
There's nothing on the agenda plan at the moment, but I understand
We can ask GCP.
I understand there will be an update on the resident parking schemes, yeah.
We'll ask GCP to do an update on residents' parking in March.
So, Chair, just for clarification, that will be all the ones that we have shown an interest in. That will be the Romsey scheme and the.
That's right.
The York scheme.
Yes, that's all of them.
So that report will come to the next committee.
Yes.
Of where they are now, where they're going, and what they're doing at the time.
Yes.
Thank you.
And if there is any information that can be sent ahead of that, we'll ask for that to happen. Okay. And now then can we just go back to the home school transport? So that is, if that is not in the remit of, oh, sorry, Councillor Bird, do you want to go?
Yes, Chair, I really wanted to talk about that because the taxes we have for the SEND children a lot of it is because a child cannot travel on a bus, not just because the child's in a wheelchair, it could be part of their other disabilities. So we have to look at that very careful. And I know the bill is huge. And if we can get children on the buses and be normal, like normal children as such, that would be great. But I think the county council will always have a big bill for disabled children. So that I just wanted to make sure that people understood that.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. So the issue about the park and ride stroke transport hubs and the homeschool transports are both outside of the remit of this committee, but it's something we can see how in the development of this committee where these issues can be better discussed here, and also the public come along to discuss these. But at the moment, these are going to be minuted, but they aren't necessarily going to be brought as reports. But I think it's good that they're raised, because where they are being dealt with, it's very important that they know that we in this committee, which represents the city and the county, we're very concerned about these issues, and we want to know what's happening, and we want to have an input into it. Councillor Beckett.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thornborough. I'm wondering with the home to school transport one, home to school transport in terms of the buses is definitely outside the remit of this committee. It sits within children and young people at the county council and with the combined authority. However, I'm not sure whether school streets, youth travel ambassadors, all those sorts of parts of home to school transport, i.e. active travel provision, what we can do around that, whether that actually sits outside the remit of this committee. I'm not sure whether any officers are able to confirm or deny that as to whether that might be something we're able to talk about at least, even if not the full home to school transport.
So what I think the way forward would be for the right officers at both county and city level to have a discussion and come back with a short report at the next committee about an appropriate way where this can be dealt with here at CJAC. Because we're not going to be, we want to try and put something on the forward plan. This seems to be something that collectively we're very interested in, and it's not going to be in the March, won't be for March, it will be the next civic year coming through. But maybe in the March, the next CJAC, we may be able to have a short discussion about what is appropriate for us to talk about and how we can get involved going forward. Is that clear enough? Do you understand?
Yeah.
Councillor Shayler.
Sorry, Chair. I just thought that some of that is, yes, having discussion about what we can talk about is nice and good, but I think there is actually some stuff that we can talk about in the next meeting, some parts of it. So I don't know whether, I'm not going to make officers, confirm now, but if there are elements of it that we can talk about, would it not make sense to at the March on Strohan or, wherever, add it to the agenda plan to have the bits that we can talk about in there, as well as talk about the bits that we can't talk about, if that makes sense?
Well, what I was saying is, yes, let's talk about it next time and agree a more comprehensive discussion on this after the elections, in the new civic year. Well, but the officer has already reported that this could be outside of the remit of this committee. So what we're asking for is, let's look at that again and see what we can talk about and have that confirmed at the next committee, and then we can decide when we want an in-depth discussion. Councillor Shayler.
Thank you, Chair. The part that might be in the remit here is the safe walking and cycling routes to school. And this was really a lot of the motivation and the move that was done in the Netherlands and the Low Country was about how children can move around. And so this could be joined up in cutting back vegetation, proper lighting, surfaces, all those things seem to be absolutely what we could be talking about here. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we've got that minuted, and we will see what we can do, and we will be discussing this in the future. Is there anything else that people would like to talk about now or for the agenda plan? Councillor Beckett.
Councillor Shayler has just reminded me that actually one of the interesting things that we have in terms of public rights of way and all of those things is that vegetation clearance within the city is actually the responsibility of the city council, or at least it gets contracted out to the city council by the county council. And there are sometimes questions that come up about that. So I don't know, Chair, whether, I'm not going to say that we should put it on the agenda plan, but maybe it's something we could consider as something that would be an interesting thing to talk about, how we do vegetation clearance, what should be done and how that's done in the city, because it is one of those joined up city-county things.
There is a process. There is a process about notification when greenery clearance is needed. And then, you're right, and then how it needs to go to the county council and then it comes back to the city council. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we use our, can we take turn and, can we use your microphone, please, so that others can hear?
I think there is a very good case here for a briefing, because obviously county councillors spend an inordinate amount of time trying to wrestle with this and dealing with city council colleagues and city council officers. If there is going to be a functioning CGAC, it would hopefully be acceptable to members to have briefings. They can be online, but if the officers come together to explain what to do with some case studies, that would be immensely useful, especially for new members. There'll be a lot of new members from the county council elections and similarly in the up by thirds elections. So that there is a clear way for local councillors to make progress, because it's a tremendous waste of our time to be learning what to do and then failing to do it. So that's to follow up on that. I really think a briefing, this is what we get in our individual councils, obviously, but where it's a shared thing, and it's one of the most contentious shared things that makes a mockery of our policies for active travel and travel to school particularly. We must get this together, otherwise this committee is not doing its job, I don't think.
Well, I think we could do a whole list of the briefings that we need to do. That's combining the two.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So on that note, I would like to thank the officers for their hard work and bringing the papers, and our committee manager for keeping us online. And thank you for the committee members. Councillor Beckett.
Chair, thank you so much for that. Before we go, I believe this might be Sonia's last CJAC meeting. So if that is the case, I would just like to extend my thanks and hopefully the thanks to this committee for the work that she's done in it. It has been greatly appreciated, and Sonia, good luck with all the other things that you're getting up to now. So thank you.
I'd also, and Lynn Miles is not here today, but she's been part of this committee, and I think we must wish her all the best for her future as well, because she's moving on. Thank you. Thank you, committee, and I think it's safe to say, hope you have a very festive and happy break. Thank you.